Watch.
All right. Welcome back,
Doing it
everyone.
again.
Doing
no,
what
it's
again?
not. Hang on. Hold on.
Oh, do we have technical issues already?
Rookie mistake.
Are
I
we-
had the. I
are we
was
good?
looking at the YouTube feed to see if we were on, and I had the volume going through the headphones. I was like, "Oh, it's repeating." My bad.
Oh,
Blew the beginning of the show.
That's all right. I did that once, and it for like 5-10 minutes. I'm like, "What the heck is going on?" Blah blah blah. Anyway, we're here. Welcome to the second watch, everyone. We are going to be talking about modern games and campaigns and whatnot, and we are going to be joined by DM Cloaker, our good friend Brian, and he just arrived. Let's get him in here. Hey, Brian, what's going on, man?
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Show up when you want, bro. We'll just be here. I tell you what.
Man, it was right at the edge, and I had to like wipe tears out of my eyes because that movie Flow. It's a beautiful movie. The animation is just out of this world. But
Well, anyway, we're talking about modern role playing games. You big sissy. All right. No, I'm just.
I would say there's a
Hey,
lot
look.
of adventure and a lot of role playing in the movie Flow. There are a lot of good characters, and they are defined by their actions. But I'll defer.
Right on. Yeah, so last week we had on Miguel from Red Room. We talked about Wretched, which is a game set in modern times. And they got me and Matt to thinking just about running a modern game and what that's like and how you set it up. So chat, please chime in whenever you get the chance. Matt, how would you define what we're talking about? Is it an RPG set in the modern world, set in a modern world? How far out do we get to go? Is cyberpunk modern? I don't think so, but it's getting closer.
Yeah, I actually have a lot to say on that, but before we get into the meat of this, I do want to
do
a little bit of news. No, it's all right. I wanted to note a couple things that are happening on the server. For those who are part of the server, there should be an invite to my Discord server in the description below. Travis Faber has given me the Full Metal Tilt jousting rules to play test. I've mentioned it before. This weekend, I'm actually going to go through some of my RPG stuff and put in the promotional books and stuff that will be prizes for those who want to participate in the joust. I just got to figure out a time. So if this is something you want to help an indie creator play test something that he wants to put out there, now it's your chance. You'll get your name in the book, and if you win the joust, you'll win something. I might actually give top 3 prizes. And Travis even mentioned that he'll run the thing for us, in which case I get to play the Black Knight. So that looks cool. Secondly, another fan of the stream who's regularly here, House of Nyx, he is putting together a Call of Cthulhu game on the server. It looks like he's got about 6 or 7 people already interested. I am going to find time for that because I haven't played Call of Cthulhu in friggin' forever. So if you're interested in that, please, again, you're more than welcome to join the server. And then finally, coming soon, let's see if I can get this up here. I'm going to share my screen here. Where is it? There it is. We have Wretched Folklore, the Enhanced Edition. I just got the proof from Miguel this morning. It's actually the highlight of my week. I've had such a crappy week, so this was really nice to get. I'm going to be going through it this weekend. PDFs will be available hopefully soon, and then I'm going to send it to Lulu for physical copies. I am going to try to keep the PDF below $10. It should be around $8, I think, and then similarly, I'm going to try to keep the physical copy below 20. So just FYI, I'll let everyone know when it's ready.
I feel like I'm stealing from you, Matt. Below $20. At that price, you can't afford not to buy.
It's price to move.
Buy. Yeah.
I'm told I don't pimp my stuff enough, so there you go. I pimped it. Anyway, to answer
Hey, there's
your
a lot of
question,
games on the server right now. I'm joining Legacy on Saturday. He's running Borderlands, OSC Borderlands game.
How
So
fun.
it
Wow.
scared the shit out of me because he started. I didn't know we were doing Fantasy Grounds. And so we went to make characters, and I was like, no. And the print was real small, and I couldn't read. I was so mad. Fucking VTT, but he knows how to work it. And we got through it. Thank you, Legacy.
yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Okay, so sorry I jumped the gun there, Matt.
Well, how do I define a modern game?
Let's talk. Yeah, how do you? So we talk about it's a role playing game in a modern setting. What are the parameters for a modern setting?
I wanted to say first thing, yeah, I would separate modern from sci-fi. I think I would include cyberpunk, but it's just because it's like near future, you know. And it just sort of seems to be the go-to, you know. So I would include that, but for me, modern would be the closest thing, game campaign that you will have that puts you well, yeah, it's the farthest thing. I should start there. It's the farthest thing from fantasy and the closest thing to everyday. And I think that poses some really interesting challenges for a game master and the table as a whole. Because when you're playing fantasy, you get into this headspace of, well, I'm going to play this trope, right? I'm going to play the barbarian fighter, and every time I charge into combat, I shout, "Crom, count the dead!" And everyone's having a good time. Whereas now you're in everyday life, and if someone describes like the bad guy's Kia wrong, you might be having difficulties with immersion. You know what I mean? So,
ready, fight.
Here we go.
I would say it can and typically does have an element of the fantastic, whether it's high technology or magic or what have you. I mean, like if you want to play Twilight 2000, there's a game, that is modern and real and all that kind of good stuff. But I would say, you look at the Stranger Things, whatever, Demigorgons and whatever the fuck. What is that game called?
I can't. Anyway, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a Stranger Things, Dark Places and Demigorgons, something like that.
Oh yeah, that's what.
Yeah, I think it Tales from the Loop, even though that's a very are there rules to this game kind of game? I would say that's modern with a huge overlay of the fantastic. So somebody said post-industrial revolution, and I think that's actually kind of a good answer, really, right? Although I do think the further back you go, like we're doing a 1920s campaign right now.
Right.
Just before that, I did a campaign set in the 1970s. Completely different mood, tone, everything. So I think post-industrial revolution is a good place to start, but I think the closer you get to that, the more kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just me.
I don't think a modern game has to exclude the fantastical. I mean, that's still what makes it a game, in the sense of this sort of imaginative experience that everyone's going to have at the table. For me, you're less worried about these tropes from fantasy, and it becomes more realistic. And I think that is kind of the obvious distinction, right? But within that, there is a lot to unpack, and I think you have issues. I shouldn't say issues. I should say difficulties and things you have to think about when running the game. If you don't, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about guns, for example, because I don't know a lot about guns. And if I had someone at the table who knows a lot about guns and I say something stupid, we're playing in a World War II setting and the Nazis are coming at you with AK-47s, I did something stupid, right? And it's going to break immersion. So you have some interesting difficulties there when running one of these games. But if I were to define it, I would say that it is something furthest away from fantasy, but it doesn't completely exclude fantasy.
It's intriguing to consider what are the things that are also similar to fantasy that are still translatable, because most of your audience that's ever played tabletop role-playing games, they started fantasy. So they're still looking for these threads to pull on whenever they go into a new game. So many of modern games, quote unquote, they're so steeped in genres, and we latch on to those genres probably a lot more readily in modern type of role playing, whether it's pulpy, espionage, etc. Whereas it's a little bit more vanilla with fantasy. Whenever I think of modern, and having probably played the most modern whatever setting or game, was about a 6-year top secret game intermittently.
I was going to ask you about that. You
Yeah,
ran, was that a 6-year campaign, or was
not
that
a campaign. Campaign
okay?
probably 3 years, but then we
Yeah,
came back to characters later and did like epilogues, or 10 years later, uh, some pretty high drama and strong narrative, and it was really fulfilling. But we'd kind of grown. But I'm getting sidetracked. Squirrel. I think that there's some elements though that do make modern distinctly modern. If you think about like factions, like from what comes from like traditional fantasy, and factions help create friction. Well, we have politics. I'm not going to go too far. Don't worry, we're pumping the brakes here. Media, is certainly one, because media is almost like its own religion in modern. I mean, like it really does influence the way people think, or govern, or buy, or purchase. You think about, when you were mentioning, Matt, about guns. I remember buying Cyberpunk and Solo of Fortune. It was done like a Soldier of Fortune type of magazine,
I
but it
love
was
solos. Yeah.
and but it was really done with like a Soldier of Fortune 1980s media type of presentation, with like the dude with the photo and the glasses and the guns and such, which made it relatable, even though we're talking about cyberpunk. um, and ultimately, modern isn't that far off from what we've all done before. It just kind of comes down to, where do you want to root it.
I
For
think it's
me to
I
do,
think it's
I did Sin City for my really extended third edition D20 Modern game. And it was very entertaining, very successful. But even then, I had to kind of fall back on a genre to
Oh
really.
yeah, oh yeah, and I think that's a really good point that you bring up with the genres. But I just want to highlight something Al Ed said
please.
here. Um, in this conversation, does fantasy include urban fantasy settings like the game Dark Streets and Darker Secrets, or settings of Dresden Files? I'm not too familiar with the Dresden Files, for example, that you bring up there, but I would actually include something like Final Fantasy VII. As like that technology and magic mix. I would still consider that fantasy, not a modern game, even though there's guns
Well,
in it.
Dresden
So,
is Dresden is
but I don't know
modern
the
day Chicago. It's like modern day Chicago with secret magic and monsters. We're talking about urban fantasy. Then I think what they're talking about would be more, well, like Dresden, where it's urban Chicago with magic and secret wizards and all that kind of stuff. Or you could even be like Buffy, or something like that, where it's modern times, but you have that magical element.
I think if the magical element wasn't prevalent, I would probably consider it magical, because, like, I would consider Wretched RPG. This, like you said earlier, this was sort of the jumping off point into this
Right.
topic. That has magic in it and all psychic stuff in it and demons in it, right? But it's not readily apparent depending on what setting you're using. I mean, if it's kind of in the background, um,
It shouldn't.
the modern stuff is still sort of like the driving force, or of the narrative, or of the game mechanics or something. I think I'd consider urban fantasy, or
Wait a second.
modern.
Hold on.
But I
Hold
but I
on.
just want to give an example of like kind of what that might be relatable. Um, Cowboy Bebop. I love that Japanese animation, the anime, right?
Mhm.
I'm not a big fan of a lot of that stuff because of the big robots and the big eyes and I'm not a big fan of a lot of that stuff. But for some reason, when I first watched it, and I had to actually have a conversation with a friend of mine who's really into that stuff to kind of help me figure out why I liked it so much. The is because of all the technology and weird stuff that would make it anime was all in the background, and it was still this really noir, jazz and flute infused character story. So to me, if the magic is in the background and you still have like this very modern, like themes and I guess tropes, it would still be a modern game. But if magic is prevalent and kind of taking center stage, like again, Final Fantasy VII is like my go-to example here, then I would consider it fantasy
or urban fantasy.
Yeah. But broadly speaking, I would put it in that box versus the modern box.
Oh, okay, but I would still consider that like a modern. Okay, here's the problem. This is what I'm thinking about, right? I think we're cell phones, right? I don't care. You can ride a fucking dragon, you know what I mean, to work. But if you have a cell phone, it's a modern game. You have all the modern conveniences. It's available to everybody.
I don't think it's.
I do think
okay, go ahead.
you can. There does come a point where it crosses over into fantasy. The same thing with like cyberpunk. Cyberpunk's right on that edge of being modern and being like super sci-fi. We're catching up to cyberpunk every day, right? So it's kind of it's right on that edge. But if you take it just a couple steps too far, it's just another sci-fi game. I think it is. I think the fantastic part can be heavy, and in fact, I don't see how it can't be. I don't see how it can't take center stage, even if it's not like I don't know. I feel like it is. It's going to be the goal. It's going to be at the finale.
I know we're gonna.
It's going to be right in there the whole time.
We're about to start fighting.
It could be the whole motivation. If we think, hold on, if we think about, you got to stop the cult from doing the bad thing, right? The whole movie, whether they have magic or not, the whole movie centered around we got to stop the fucking cult leader from pulling off the ceremony.
If the cult doesn't have magical abilities and they're just this spooky, twisted cult, it's a modern game. If the cult can hurl a fireball at you, I was about to answer that. Okay. I'm on fire tonight, folks. All right. If the cult can throw fireballs at you while you're pulling out your M60 to lay waste to them, then it's fantasy.
Big Trouble in Little China.
So the fantasy, urban fantasy. I mean, we already kind of have some parameters, right?
That's fine.
Magic, monsters, supernatural. Like that does kind of shelve a lot of these games into that. Technology is a blur. Technology is a blurring line depending on where you're at.
I think so.
And then you also have those elements, and it's the big pitfall usually. And it's probably the reason why it's been so hard for a modern game to really have relevancy long term and be so high profile. And it goes back, Matt, to what you were saying earlier, which is realism. It's so much easier for us to fall back with that with fantasy because verisimilitude is not as forward. It doesn't have to be as congruent. But whenever you're dealing with, again, what we think is all modern, and we're all in different areas because I'm thinking modern is more morality. It's the frictions of choice that are different and based out of a modern experience, setting aside. I mean, like, what are alignments in today's world? And that doesn't have relevancy because it's the choices and the branching opportunities are so much more varied. It's a lot for GMs, by the way, to keep up with. It's a way more bandwidth because you're going to have even a higher degree of imposter syndrome or a sense of feeling that I'm not fluent in the experience that my players are wanting. So it's probably part of the reason why we've never really seen a modern setting go longer, or modern game go longer than maybe 5 years, and then get rotated out for something else.
Or even a modern game system be as popular as something like D&D.
Sure.
Because I mean, the fantasy is easier to kind of deal with because it's whatever you want it to be,
Well, we're
right?
talking escapism, right? Escapism on its different levels.
Yeah. So
overplaying reality. I mean, it can be a brutal confrontation of one's ideals and virtues and sins. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're having that stuff on the stage
that's
in front of
how
your
Wretched
friends.
handles it. Yeah, Wretched, when we talked to Miguel last week, Wretched does sins and virtues. And you have one of each, and that kind of takes the place of alignment. And I think, and that's the thing. Here's the other thing. We're talking about modern role-playing games like they're just another game. And I am of the opinion that there are different expectations for playing in a modern setting, and that it's not, I don't think you set it up the same way. I could be wrong, and I'm willing to be proved wrong, but I think it's a different beast. It's the difference between playing Candyland and what's that, Imperium Twilight or whatever that game is.
Well, my fantasy games are no Candyland, sir. But that was many.
They are. The gumdrops are made out of blood.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Lamentations of the Flame Princess meets Candyland. Oh, anyway. Oh, that's actually a neat idea. I'll write that down. No, I actually agree with you. I do think it's an entirely different beast, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's so hard for anything to really take off. Again, I think the fantasy dealing with playing a fantasy game is probably a little easier from a game master's perspective because there's a dragon and there's fireballs and there's this, that, and the other thing. But when you're dealing with everyday life, I mean, you got taxes, you got bills to pay. Like that's something that, I mean, I'm not saying you have to make it a focal point, but something a character might have to deal with, right? So I'm just saying, like there's this more verisimilitude, that the word that Brian just used a few seconds ago, that comes into play, and I do think that a campaign design and a game that you're putting together is you do have to think differently, and I'm dealing with that right now because I have two ideas in mind and they're very, very different. Before we go on, I actually want to say hello to a bunch of people who just been dropping into chat and get a chance.
What's up, guys?
Ultra American, hey, thanks for being here. I saw Disco Barbarian. Hey, man, thanks for stopping by. I see Chubby Funster. I saw Flint Fireforge. Thanks for stopping by. I think I saw Aries. I haven't seen him here before, but welcome. Who else? L Ed, we highlighted one of your comments. Mr. Dune Trader, thanks for showing up. Law Dog, what's up here, man? He's asking, do the other two panelists have YouTube channels?
I'm not a panelist. I take offense to that. I'm no second-class citizen, dude.
He's my co-host.
I don't have a YouTube channel.
I'm just a filthy casual dropping.
Yeah, I like doing the stream with Matt. Me and Matt enjoy talking about games together, and I like playing games with Matt. We're game buddies. Yeah, that's really what you're doing. We would be doing this anyway. Like me and Matt would be arguing. We wouldn't be as nice to each other. Like we would have. That is very true. We would not be as nice to each other. But we would be having these conversations anyway. So don't be sorry.
You're good, man. And just for your edification, the three of us actually some years ago during the halcyon bygone era of COVID did a podcast together, and I personally love talking to both of these guys. They're very good game masters, and they know a thing or two about a thing or two. And I think, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the best way to be a game master is to not only just play and develop your practice, but have honest conversations with game masters and learn from their techniques. Because I don't believe there's one way. There's a lot of wrong ways to do it. But running a game, creating a game is something that requires you to have a lot of tools in your toolbox to pull out. I've called it the baptism theory of game, and you just like create this thing for your players, and you'll learn a lot from hopefully all three of us. there's something else I wanted to say. Oh, something I don't do enough. If you like what you hear and what you're seeing, please hit like, subscribe, the bell icon, yada yada yada. I'm also on Rumble. I would love to see a lot of people on Rumble. Rumble's way more generous to streamers. So and we got looks like a super chat from Disco. Don't know if the Wretched Folklore you showed is new or not. The copy you sent me is really good, and I highly recommend if in your game's wheelhouse. The Wretched Folklore I showed is actually an updated version. I've been meaning to do it for a while, so it's got some new rules in it. Updated the monsters to the second edition of the game. Updated the spiritualist character class to Miguel's updated wretched rules. There's new shaman rituals. There's rules for cyberpunk creation, or not cyberpunk, excuse me, steampunk creations. And then I expanded a little bit on kung fu. So if you have the academic skill Shaolin, you can make a roll and do a meditative exercise in the beginning, and it'll give you some bonuses for the day, things like that. So hopefully that'll come out soon. But thank you for the super chat, Disco. Appreciate it. So anyway, where were we?
I mean, we were all over the place, weren't we? About what is modern, why is modern?
Yes.
But I find it interesting because I didn't know this was going to be the topic until a little while, like a day or two ago. But why modern? Like, why do we still find ourselves returning back to wanting to run these sort of games? Like, what is the draw?
Well, I think there's well, for me, like going to like my appendix N of sorts for modern games would be, oh, it's pretty varied, but like you and from the escapist perspective, if I'm playing a more military guy, I want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in the jungle hunting the predator, or being hunted, right? But like, there's also that like human element too. Like one of the ideas I have for the server once my Lamentations of Elemental Evil game wraps up, I'm calling it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. I'm calling it Apocalypse K Long. It's essentially a modern hex crawl through a fantasy Southeast Asia, and it's that human element of military service. Like, you're going to be in this terrible place because it is a Lamentations module, so it's going to be hard, and there's going to be a lot of horrific crap happening to you, so it's going to be a little bit more horror, I think. But that interests me, and playing in that sort of environment. But I'm also this is a little bit more long term, been thinking really hard about a cyberpunk game using Wretched New Flesh. And I want to make it street level, so no one's really playing the high rolling corporate person. You're the dregs of society, and you're trying to survive this area. And how do I develop that and keep it kind of like fresh, so it's not just another hex crawl or city crawl?
I just don't want anyone to have anything good. All your games, everybody's poor and sad.
It's I will quote Tom Hanks from A League of Their Own. Of course it's hard. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. It's the hard that makes it great.
There's
Gary, what's modern to you? What's the draw for you? Because I know you're frequently always entertaining modern ideas and things to put in front of people.
I don't know, man. Sometimes I just get an idea. Before I was doing the row, which is 20s, and I don't even really know if that's modern, because it's almost like it's street level supers, but it's more street than super, I think. But before that, you and I and those other guys played in the Everyday Heroes game I ran, the Luna, Texas game, and that was a game that took place in the 70s. I don't, I just get ideas, and I get real excited about an idea, and I work on it for about a month, and then if nobody else wants to play, I start working on something else. I mean, that's really, I don't know. And with a lot of times with modern games, it's just the setting, or I just get an idea. Like Luna's set where I grew up. That was one of it. I had this idea about turning the place where I grew up into this really sort of creepy, mystical, dirty. It's already dirty, but you know what I mean. it's just, and then one day you have a game. And fantasy's never been like my favorite genre. I mean, here's the thing. In gaming wise, RPGs, I've probably played, more Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, it's about 50-50, right? So I obviously like fantasy enough. It's, my favorite game right now is Old School Essentials, but the genre itself it just doesn't hold me like it did when I was a kid. So, and I think there's different possibilities you get with role playing outside of just fantasy. And I don't want to pick on fantasy. It's just that we all play fantasy games. You know what I mean? We all play them. It is the primary game that we play.
Yeah.
So,
do you think that's because sometimes people enjoy fantasy as a little bit of a buffer? Like it can help a little bit in processing decision trees and consequences and all the gray areas are a little stickier.
maybe, I don't know.
I don't know
I mean,
about
isn't
that.
Call of Cthulhu like the number one game in Japan? And isn't there a different game in Germany? And I don't know. I mean, maybe. I think fantasy is what we know. I think fantasy is what we're comfortable with.
Universal language, as it were.
I think that's a fair way to put it.
Yeah, and I also think fantasy really works with a D20. I think, try to do sci-fi with a D20, things kind of start, maybe not break, but you're.
You know what? That's a great point, though, because Top Secret, what I enjoyed about Top Secret was the percentile system, especially with skills and all how it was rooted back to abilities. And it wasn't like just pure, like there was different levels of it. It was very granular and it made sense. It was very intuitive. And I put that game in front of people from when I was in the Air Force, whenever I was in high school, girlfriends, and the percentile aspect and the modern piece made those two really mesh. I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes the funnier the dice, the more fantasy sometimes it might wind up.
It's just the way the numbers work. It's when you start doing things with vehicles and big explosions and everything. I think the D20 just doesn't quite cover that kind of scale. Right.
I also think
yeah.
Well, I think it's also an issue of like abstraction too. Again, fantasy taps right into our imagination a lot easier than modern because of what it is. And so, like rolling a d20 to attack, we hear this all the time. Your hit points are just an abstraction. You're not just making one attack; it represents all this other stuff. But like you brought up skills, Brian, and to me, that's a defining feature of game mechanics between fantasy and modern. Like
I hate most systems, by the way.
Yeah, I don't like seeing them in fantasy games, but
and that's a real big dividing line for me. Like I really do enjoy skillless systems for fantasy because then everyone can participate, whereas skilled systems in modern settings, what?
I'm sorry, Chubby said something funny.
He's been cracking me up most of the evening. Thanks, Chubby.
But then percentile
trying to be professional
skilled systems with modern feels a lot more rooted in all the things that we practice and learn and have access to resources on and so forth. So
I just wanted to add the point.
Like even in Supers games, I don't really like skills that much.
Yeah, well, that's because it's more about the tropes and the character you're playing, and that's what makes like old school D&D so great because they didn't need a thief class at the beginning, right? Because Conan just sort of stole stuff. You know what I mean? I want to highlight something that Chubby said. Here it is. Almost all modern future games is that they tend to lack dungeon-like structures that players can constantly raid. Even Traveler suffers from this to a degree. The dungeon structure helps a lot. What do you guys think of that? I'm not sure.
It really gives you four walls, right? I mean, whereas scalability, especially when it comes to ranged combat, once you have bigger theaters, the more modern, the bigger sometimes the theater, and it makes it a little bit more tough to keep up with action in different areas unless you have a system that's robust enough to handle it.
So
I wanted to go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, I agree, but I don't think dungeon structures are necessary for a modern game. And I think that goes back to, we haven't gotten there yet, but I think it goes back to like
I'm
how a
gonna get
modern
there.
game is actually constructed and how you do a campaign. Because while the occasional raid on like Nakatomi Tower, right, would be fun, I think the draw to modern games is a bit different. I think it's more character driven, really, because it's less about the tropes and it's about what the characters are experiencing in this whatever story arc they're involved in, whether it's a one that they came up with themselves or it's some adventure path that the game master put together. So I don't think they're necessary.
What do we have? I don't know if we have a consensus because that's definitely not like us. But
No, we don't.
June brought up earlier about Traveler. It's probably the most persistent of the modern settings to kind of still be there always.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider Traveler modern. I put that in the
Sci-fi.
sci-fi category.
GURPS?
Yeah. Isn't that more of like a universal system?
Yeah, it's
that
generic.
can be applied to modern. I mean, what's
you
our
can
favorite
apply-
modern system? What's been
I don't
the
know
one-
that's the other problem. I don't know if I have a favorite modern system.
Mine is Wretched.
No, I like Wretched. There's a lot of good stuff about Wretched, but I also so we played, me and Brian played Everyday Heroes, and I don't want to say too much because I don't feel like I have a lot of positive things to say. I was real excited about it. If you guys know what I'm talking about, Everyday Heroes, Evil Genius Games. I was real excited about it when it came out. It's 5e, it's modern. That's some really cool like tie-ins with movies. I don't know why. I don't want to like. I was so ready to be done with that system when we were done, and I don't know why.
But Gary,
I
that
think
was
some
a 5e
people.
system thing. That was a 5e system thing, I think.
It might just be me.
You
I just don't.
would have had much more fun running a different system than 5e.
Well, and that's the thing. So I've got, and I know I see old boy in chat up here. I've never met him, but I do have Modern Necessities, the new version. I got it before your sale, and I paid full price. Anyway, so I could see myself running, like OSE using Modern Necessities or parts of Modern Necessities. I think Wretched is great because it's just a big toolkit. I mean, with Wretched, you can kind of, I don't want to say it's generic. You can't do superheroes. I don't think it's really built for fantasy.
I would agree with you on that. That was actually one of my complaints. I shouldn't say criticisms. When I first read Wretched Bastards, I'm like, this is a skill system masquerading as a class system. And when I play fantasy, I want those tropes. I want to play the fighter. I want to play the magic user. I don't want to have to worry about my skills and how, my +1 to my sword skill versus, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So, but I like Wretched for the modern stuff. Like Wretched Interbellum is awesome. Wretched Armageddon, this is their World War II, Cyberpunk, all of that stuff is great. Of course, I haven't looked at Savage Swords yet, so that might be different. But that's their red system. Yeah,
that might be different for sure. So, okay, it's easy with fantasy games. We have a dungeon, we have hex crawls. As time goes on, if you're hello Victor, I know I saw that, man, and I recognize you. I didn't think you'd recognize me, and I could see I was just saying, if I do anything modern soon, it would probably be Wretched or OSC with Modern Necessities. I kind of like that book. How do you go about if we have a dungeon and in fantasy games and we have hex crawls and we have all that, we kind of have a system for creating our fantasy games. How do you go about creating a modern game? Like the way I see it. Oh,
I got a super chat in, $2 from Disco Barbarian. Thank you very much, man. Wretched has Wretched Vigilantes. That's right, it does. But is that an actual? Is that an actual game or?
No, I asked Miguel about it when he was on the show, and it's very street level, like Batman kind of. You know what I mean? It's not.
Captain America.
It's not Marvel superheroes, TSR.
Yeah.
It's not that. So yeah, so what do you do? How do you go about planning these things? Because I don't think anybody knows, and I think that's why modern gaming hasn't really, or game set in modern worlds hasn't really taken off.
I agree with you. I
It's
agree
got
with
to
you 100%.
be, it's got to be, it's like it has to be mission based, right? So
I don't know about
well,
that.
I mean, I feel well, I say it has to. I think if you have it be mission based, like a heist or like a military unit or mercenaries or something like that, where you come in and there's a goal, I think that makes it very easy on the game master to plan a game that takes place in modern times.
I I
That's
agree
what I think.
that that would be easy to do. But you would be sort of pigeonholing yourself into a particular thing. And this is where something like Modern Necessities would work, because that game does sort of have more, it's got character classes, so it's more tropes that you'd
Right.
see in a modern movie, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, or whatever. And that would be fine. In fact, that was a game I was thinking about using for the Apocalypse K Long campaign. But where's I going with this? But I think there's more to modern than that. Like, so going back to my cyberpunk thing I've been thinking about, what I'm thinking about doing is something similar to um what you initially had done for the row. Instead of having locations, having NPCs that the players know about, where those NPCs almost like having little exclamation marks over their heads, where they can,
Right.
and these would be factions that the players can have the choice to ally with and do work with. And so there's a little bit more freedom there. That's something I've been thinking about doing.
Well, so that's the thing. If the reason I say mission, right? So Victor just said an apartment complex is a dungeon, right? Absolutely. And when you are playing in a modern game, and let's say you're playing a SWAT team, right? You have a mission. Go to the dungeon apartment complex and do the shit that you have to do. Okay. I'm wondering, when you get away from something mission based, where it's all, everything is kind of laid out. Not railroaded, but you're part of the rebellion. You're gonna fuck shit up for the empire, right? When you get away from that, what's the story? Do you want a story? And bro, I'm doing a thing right now where it's not location based, it's not mission based, it's very NPC based. And it can it can be tough as a game
Oh, I
master to
know.
do
I
that.
know. I know. And I think that you're speaking of the row, and we've talked a little bit about this. I think part of that was you had a bunch of OSR guys jumping in on this game, and they were thinking in terms of location. Well, we're gonna go to oh, I can't remember the one spot where they got set on fire. But we're gonna go there,
Base,
and we're
yeah,
gonna,
yeah.
yeah. Um, and that actually hurt us thinking like that, because we weren't actually doing the investigation that we needed to do to like figure out what the heck's going on. Like, frankly, I'm shocked like the bad guys haven't succeeded by now, because we hadn't been really doing any investigative work that you should be doing in like a game like that.
But
So,
technically, you guys have only been there for about 2.5, 3 weeks.
well, bad guys can move
I'm
quickly.
just
I don't
saying.
know. Yeah, that's true. That's fair. Here we got another super chat. Whoops, wrong one. There it is. $10 from Ultra American. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. A lot of the modern day games I come across usually suffer from what I now call the axe disorder. They want to focus more on the details and the mechanics in the game and the setting itself. Well, that's interesting. What do you guys think of that?
I think very similarly.
Well,
Oh
And
yeah.
I think
it's funny too, because so much of our conversation is going around things like missions and big action set pieces and such like that. And don't get me wrong, I know that's such a big part of the draw, but my mind, when I think of modern role playing, I do want immersion, and I want there to be choices that are going to be really important, that are going to unfold. I think of stuff like, I don't know, like Run Willa Run, La Femme Nikita. I think of stuff like Hell or High Water. I think of those things that in today's world are really, there's so much static in why a person views a character in some sort of media and why they do it. Like nobody, that takes a little bit higher. It's almost a John Wickian sort of type of level. But yeah, mission based doesn't attract me. Being parts of big organizations and factions don't attract. I don't find that. That's probably why I spent time with Sin City so much for a couple of years running that D20 Modern. Although in retrospect, I would have loved to have really translated it more into the top secret SI rule set. But having that morality, the morality of choice, why people do what they do whenever pressed and adversity reveals character. That is what I find compelling about modern genre role play.
And I'm going to address this super chat just a second, but I actually kind of agree with you. Like that Sin City game sounds awesome. Like I'd rather do something like that where there's all this like investigation, maneuvering, discussions with your opponents, whether they're the bad guys or not, they're your opponents, and then maybe culminates into a shootout somewhere, or maybe there was a shootout and then there's an aftermath. To me, there's more drama like in that kind of thing, and that's why I'm thinking about my Cyberpunk game to set it up like that, where let the players decide who they like and who they dislike, and then let the kind of story evolve from there. Super chat, Disco Barbarian, man, you are on fire. Thank you very much. $2. SWAT, do the mission, role play, go in a bar, and divorce.
Okay, well, hold on. So let's talk about that a little bit, because Matt, your server, your Discord server, I would say is primarily OSR guys, and I love it. That's I'm there a lot. That's what I'm there for, right? When you're talking about role playing, okay? Does role playing mean something different in a game that's in a modern that takes place in a modern setting than it does in a fantasy? I know there are people like there's no difference between fantasy and modern. It's just I think there's a difference. I think there's different expectations. I think there's different things that people want out of those games. Anyway, I just sorry, I got off track.
No,
This is a
you're
hard
highlighting.
topic.
I know. Well, this is one of the reasons why we might be revisiting this,
Yeah.
because I mean we're still in the definition stage, and it's been 48 minutes. So and that's fine. But like, so you say there's different expectations. Well, what are those? What do you think they are?
I think I think people expect it, and even I fall victim to this as a game master planning for these games. I think people expect a TV show or a movie. I think they expect, and I think the younger gamers especially expect some kind of story arc for their character that, is some crazy, Matt Mercer thing tied into the greater story arc of the game. I know that I've fallen victim to trying to plan games like TV seasons. You know what I mean? Have each episode as an encounter, and and you just kind of start falling into these tropes. And sometimes they really work, right? And then other times they just don't. So when you talk about these who's playing these with, is the regular person that we play games with, are they going to want to role play going to the bar and getting a divorce?
Well, I think that
Right?
was a joke, but yes,
I
see
think it
what you're
was too,
saying.
but I mean, how much of that story do they want, you think?
I can tell you, my in-person gaming crew, who tomorrow we are going to be playing Shadow Dark, Keep on the Borderlands. Very excited about it. In fact, my son's going to be playing with us, and he's the most experienced character at that table, so he's excited to tell them how to play. but I can tell you, my in-person gaming crew, they probably wouldn't want to role play the divorce part. They would be into that. They would be into those kinds of things. Whereas you're right, my Discord server's got a bunch of OSR guys. I love every single one of them. I'm glad games are happening on that server, but there is a difference. And I think there is an audience. At the end of the day, I think what I'm trying to say, there is an audience for that. We'll see if there's an audience for what I want to do on my server for when we'll see. They might not,
Can you highlight Victor's statement real quick?
Which
the
one is
last
that?
one. You need to play
Yep.
a character. Yeah. You shouldn't play the shop owner for sure.
I don't know. Okay, continue. Victor's close. Victor's right in. He's in the zip code. But go ahead.
Well, no, I think he's correct. I mean, I think you have to. I think that's why some of the modern games we see now are sort of centered around the action movie kind of trope, right? There's always going to be a reason to, to go do the thing you need to do. But then you have to ask yourself, if you're not playing a soldier or a cop, or man, there's so many questions. Could you get away? Do you think you could get away with playing the shopkeeper if all of a sudden a big hole appeared in the middle of the city that took you to dinosaur land if you fell in? Like, do you think people would play something like that? Normal
I might
people
just
to
say, well, let me,
or do you want to be a badass?
Well, I'll bring in Free League, Walking Dead. I've criticized that game, but not. I've criticized the game because it doesn't do the survival part of it correctly. But the character archetypes are exactly that, like the kinds of things you would see in the survival. You have like the priest, you have the teacher, the educated one, you have the cop, you have the ex-military guy, you have the criminal, but you also have the kid. So I think it really ends up kind of depending on what kind of game you're putting together, and so long as the players are sort of like understanding that expectation. And I think going back to the row, and I don't think this is your fault at all, I think this is our fault. We were all like, yeah, we're gonna play street level, it's gonna be cool, and it's gonna be kind of dark, and it's gonna be jazzy. And then you were like, okay guys, what are you doing? And we're all like, duh, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, and kind of stumbling around the row like drunken idiots, getting into trouble. You know what I mean?
I don't think it's quite that bad.
Well, I'm exaggerating for effect.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, maybe there's just some people that I don't know. I find that running modern games can be more difficult, and I feel like I've had really good success, with most of them. But they can be difficult. So that's what we need to get into. Planning. What is it that's going to make a good modern day game? Because I agree with Victor in that you should probably have some sort of special forces team or SWAT team, or people who have a reason to get into danger, or ordinary people in a really bad situation.
Yeah, Victor got there. He was working through it here in chat, and he did a great job of kind of getting to, you have to have something that is of an element that is extraordinary. And whether it is a situation, whether it is the character, or whether it is the setting that might eventually become extraordinary or transformative. Like Victor got there. Like that is it. Now you've got something that compels action either out of necessity or intent. And now we're getting to the immersion quotient. Now we're getting a minute to win it. This is what makes, and I was thinking about it as you guys were talking, it doesn't have a heavy, it's got a light dice element. I don't know. But Fiasco is probably one of the more recently successful modern role-playing games in its own way. All right. Granted, there's not a game master or anything, but it is a modern role-playing game, kind of rooted in the whole Cohenisms of it, because you have to have elements of immersion, because everyone else at the table, everyone else at the bar, as we've played it, wound up as we're taking drinks and creating situations for each other to respond to. And that dynamic element of, well, and it goes back to The Walking Dead too. What made it so good those first few seasons, and also as a comic, is what would you do?
Right. Right.
Man,
I agree. I think you I think
good
I
job, Ryan.
prefer the from that the extraordinary person versus or extraordinary situation. I think I prefer the extraordinary situation. Why I want to start a cyberpunk setting in the dregs where you're poor and you're trying to work your way out of this situation. I think that'll be more interesting for me because the idea of the thought of like, all right, it might be fun for a little while for me. And this is just a personal preference thing. This is not me telling you suck if you like this, but playing a military group that's just doing forays into something, whether, I think after a while that would get boring for me. But like I said, that hex crawl though, the reason why K Long will be interesting for me is because it's not really a modern game. It's going to be a horror game. So, and that's my wheelhouse. So, but yeah, I would prefer The Walking Dead. That's why that was such a disappointing game, or something like that.
Oh yeah, you did play a bit of Walking Dead. I remember seeing.
Yeah, I had we played like 6 or 7 sessions, and everyone was like really into their characters, and things were kind of happening because Walking Dead's got a really great sandbox generation kit in there, and it is a sandbox game, and the players can just move along the map wherever they want to go looking for stuff. But my players just kept looking at me like, "All right, so we found water." I'm like, "Yeah, you made your roll," and they're all like, I sort of feel like they wanted more. They wanted more grit, and
What,
it's
so
just not
yeah, I
there.
was about to follow up on that. Like, why do you think that game failed to deliver, failed to fulfill as a model? It's
Yeah. Well, it abstracted the survival part of horror. Like, if it was supposed to be a zombie survival game, it failed. If it was supposed to emulate the television show, it has succeeded extraordinarily because it's literally a game. Because the zombies aren't like creatures that have hit points; they're an environmental issue where they just all of a sudden show up, and it's like an obstacle, like a trap, or like a force of nature, right? So the game literally is, because of the focus, and Free League does this relatively well, the focus on relationships and how they affect your character and the experience points you can get from that. It's literally a, dude, I'm really depressed. Oh yeah, man, that sucks. Oh, did you hear about Clara's death? Yeah, that sucks. Oh fuck, zombies. That's the game. That's the game, and it got bored. But we got bored with it after a while. So
sounds very lather, rinse, repeat. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there was some cool stuff that was happening, and it was all based on their decisions. Like I said, there's great sandbox stuff, but like they wanted the grit of how many cans of food do we have, and I'm like, according to the game, you got enough because you made your roll. You know what I mean? They wanted to keep track of that stuff. So
Gary, if you were going to redo Luna and try to relaunch it, or just kind of expand on it, on the mythos that you found so provocative, how would you take that 70s, kind of, I don't say folk horror, but it was very thematic.
It was like Smokey and the Bandit horror more than anything else. I feel like.
That sounds awesome.
You might be onto something. That's cool.
Man, I love that setting, and so, all right, let's just for a minute. It's 11 o'clock. We've been doing definitions for an hour. Maybe we can kind of talk about planning, like how you set this up, how would you do this, and all the mistakes that I have
System
made.
agnostic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No. Gary is not a writer, but I write out all my game stuff and I share it with friends sometimes. So I wanted to play. My initial idea was for, in my head, and this is how I come up with ideas a lot of times, it was Friday Night Lights meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Supernatural, right? Because and then it became real easy to do the setting because I used, my cat's going crazy. It became real easy to do the setting because I just used my hometown, or not home, the place where I grew up the most, right? It was small. I knew it. There's all these characters I grew up with that I was able to turn into characters. So that made the setting pretty easy. I knew I wanted to be this sort of dark occult-like thing. And then at some point I was looking for either the extraordinary person or the extraordinary event, right? And I just started thinking about how these some of these families had been rooted, this place where I grew up, some of these families had been in this part of Texas since before Texas was Texas, when it was Mexico, and the legacy, and you see how like families grow, and I don't know what it just got me thinking. And that's where the idea that all the supernatural stuff for you guys came from, the fact that you were legacy, you were tied into that magical place, and that's why y'all were special, right? You had been there for so many generations. As far as that was just the idea, and then as far as planning the game, I had characters and I had places. Those characters were tied to places. I had a timeline. I think I would have made different decisions in game, right? Like I may have done, like during the session, there are some things I did that I might do differently. I'm still not sure if I planned that game well or not, because it seemed like y'all had fun, but I was just throwing all these ideas on paper, and most of it was in my head.
We got a super chat. We got a super chat from Victor Gorchev. €2 back Blacklight on Kickstarter. 57 hours left. It's a Shadow Dark supplement for modern games. And Law Dog, I just want to say thank you for giving me a heads up. Apparently, the Discord link is now dead. It's supposed to be universal or whatever. So I just put the Discord link back in the chat. We got OSR Dwarf. I love this guy. He's awesome on Twitter, or X, excuse me. Just dropping by to say hi, guys. Now I need to get back to working on stuff for their darker update or sleep, or maybe I'll just keep watching. LOL. You should keep watching.
Yeah,
that's more fun.
Pour something to drink in a big cup.
And, soon I'll be able to join people with.
So if you're planning a modern setting or campaign, are you looking to plan it as a long form or episodic? Or
I was looking to plan. For me, the idea of Luna for me was that I was going to do. I think we started in '76, and we were going to have an adventure or two, and then we were going to go a year or more ahead. There is a certain moral conundrum in that game that would have been, had we gone on. Through a time jump, there would have been a time jump of a couple years, and that moral conundrum would have become the crux of. Do you remember what happened at the end of that game, Brian, when I made y'all kill all them kids?
He gets on my ass. I don't want to
cover that. Anyway, sorry. It was. I didn't make y'all do anything. Anyway,
my character, how she responded.
Yeah, your character took off. So here's the thing. I didn't really know that was gonna. I mean, I kind of knew it was gonna happen, but I figured somebody would think, "Oh, we gotta do this, we gotta do that." But they didn't. And y'all took them out, or you didn't, but the other guys did. And then I was gonna come up. Then as soon as that happened, there was a character who, and we're about to get into relationships, right? There was a character expecting a baby that he didn't know about, and Legacy has gifts, and that baby's gift was going to be the one that could figure out possession, and like just tap some. Because remember, there's no exorcisms in Luna. If you're possessed, you're just fucked. You're not getting it out. You're never closing the door. So there was this whole other part of it.
Well, I think
it was meant for long term.
Well, yeah, I just kind of jump off of that. I don't know. Well, with the one hex crawl, that is just going to go until it goes. And I actually have a built-in. What I've started doing is building in a what's the word I'm looking for? A fail condition. Basically, if you are going to be military men dropped off into this like fantasy jungle because you're going to be looking for the MacGuffin. To help stave all of reality, and you're going to have your characters plus a platoon or whatever, a squad, and when when they all die, game's over. Reality, it's done. So that's going to go until it goes. But like with the Cyberpunk one, I haven't really actually thought that far ahead, because I'm still sort of thinking about like the whole relationship thing and like
We're there.
Yeah, well, I know that's where you want to get.
And Gary
but
got there emergently. He had to talk himself and get to
yeah,
that. And it also just came out.
Yeah.
And the planning of relationships within modern games, again, one of the things that makes Sin City so instantly relatable is the relationships that you start to immediately feel because it's so fleshed out. Like the character of Marv just falls in love with this hooker and it drives the action.
Yeah.
And
You don't
it's
necessarily
an ordinary situation because there's a murder involved, and it gets very film noir and so forth. But so like if I'm planning, I'm telling you, I know you guys are going to totally give me a hard time about it. But if I'm planning a modern game, a modern session, I have to know the characters. I've got to know the PCs so I can create relationships. And that will it'll feed my idea on conflict, friction, all the different situations and the stickiness that I can start to see them respond to. And then from there, I don't want to go more than 2 or 3 sessions of thinking about anything. I want to stay in the moment. I want to really stay connected to those modern characters because modern games, as we talked about earlier, it is such a quicker jump, not with the fantastic, but it's such a quick jump to immediately say, well, I know someone that's dealt with this. I've seen this before firsthand, or I'm a subject matter expert, blah, blah, blah. So it's those things that we have as anchors that are much more intrinsic into the experience.
I'm glad you used the word anchor.
Say again?
I'm glad you used the word anchor because you didn't take part in this, but when we did the Everyday Heroes game, that the first Luna game, after I had done all the big major NPCs in towns, do you remember during character creation, I offered everybody basically said, you're a part of this family. Like, don't write your backstory, right? Like, here's some prominent families in this town. And because it was about legacy, I wanted everybody to just kind of pick, oh, I'll be a part of it. So your character starts rooted in the setting.
That was a good experience for me, by the way, because I chafed at it originally. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm being a terrible player. I'm not used to being a player. I've probably played maybe like 15 sessions in my life. I've always run games. And I was like, oh, wait, Gary needed me to be a part of this because of the lineage and the history of these families. I was like, oh, I need to do my part.
I knew that there were going to be some players who were like, no, I don't want to be, you know what I mean? They wanted to think they were in control of everything. That's not what you did. I'm just saying, like, I knew there were going to be players who just didn't like that part of it. Right.
It can feel railroady, right? If you put too much of a need for the players to connect to what you're designing instead of letting them freeform it a little bit, it can feel a little railroady. I'm just saying.
It can feel a little railroady, and which is one of the reasons those characters didn't show up a whole lot, right? Like typically it was one of the players asking, hey, I need to go see this guy or that. I did, you know what I mean? I didn't have them in there. They never went with you guys when things got crazy. But what I did do is
let us prompt it as we got.
But that's the other thing is you talk about if you're playing a modern game and you're keeping your setting small, right? Like you're not exploring like in a D&D game. You're not just taking off for the unknown. It's a place where these characters have been and they have a past, even if it's just for some silly mechanical reason, like in Tales from the Loop, where they have anchors, which is an NPC that helps you heal mechanically mental stress, right? I just thought it would make sense. All of y'all grew the story, the game hinged on you guys having had family roots there for a while. So with you, when you were kind of like, nah, I don't really want to do that, I just decided you were the first, right? Like instead of having family members that knew what was going on, you were just the first one. Everybody else was ignorant. It really wasn't that hard.
If I remember correctly, in hearing the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, whenever you weren't in combat, the only way that you were able to heal, quote unquote, or whatever is, I guess it's out of combat. You create scenes with your supporting cast, and those become the way that you stay anchored to rejuvenating. I don't know. I never played it because I was only a face rip guy, but I found it interesting that they used it that way.
Go ahead, Matt. Were you gonna say something?
No. You guys are like deep in the weeds of Luna County.
Here's the thing: is it? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, going back to something before you went into this direction, the relationships and knowing and how they're connecting and how that creates the emergent story arcs, I think is key to a modern game, because I'm not trying to harp on the people who like to play the SWAT team, but not every session is going to be a bank heist. Not every session is going to be assaulting Nakatomi Tower. And frankly, I think it's more interesting when, and again, I'm just trying to like lean into player agency here, because I do think and it would be easy. It would be easy to say, okay, you're the super duper awesome SWAT team of LA, as Free League does with their Blade Runner game, which sadly I'm also not very fond of. I haven't played it yet, but it's like you're cops, so every session is a mission, and all the other stuff about being a replicant and whatnot is sort of almost, I feel like, tacked on, and there's no real motivation to really do anything with it. So and I hate to use the word railroady, but I sort of feel like you are skirting that line, and I am not. Want to be clear here. Sometimes railroads are appropriate. Like if you're doing a one shot or you're at a convention game, that can be appropriate. But like for a game, I don't think it's a good idea. And that's why I would rather have people rather than places as sort of
So what if you have a game like I ran a Age of Rebellion game once, where really I gave the players a mission and a certain amount of resources and said, go accomplish your mission, right? So it wasn't like I didn't tell them how to do it. I didn't give them, the location or anything. It was just go, you got to get this done somehow.
That's kind of what I want to do with like the K-Long game. Just like, here's Wretched RPG. Make the kind of character you want, but here's the mission. I'm going to let them know flat out. The backstory essentially is this. Shiva
Night Ultra
is... Oh, take it easy, Ultra. Thanks for stopping by, man. Shiva, the destroyer of worlds, has finally decided enough's enough, and she's destroying all of reality. All the gods are trying to stop her, and something landed in K-Long, and the mortals, helping the gods, are sending you to go find it. Go make your characters. How are you going to do it? Are you going to be military all the way? Are you going to have like someone who's going to try to mingle with the people? And, what are you going to do? Like, I'll leave that up to the players.
You have a hook. You have a hook that they can immediately go ahead and decide what bait they want to put on it.
And I think that'll avoid the railroad, Yep.
Yes, Dying Breed. Please put his thing up. Do you think modern settings tend towards story? Yes, absolutely. And I don't know why.
I don't.
I think it's the relationship issue.
Yeah, okay. I think it tends more towards character centric.
Then why don't? Here's the thing. Okay, here's my question. If and I agree, the relationship part. If you're gonna have a game that has story, right? A modern game, the relationship part is important. Okay. But I feel like if it's not somehow mechanically represented in the game, it's just us wrapping story around mechanic. And let's say it's arbitrary, right? At what point do the players start playing for the GM and not for their character? You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to please the GM,
that's an interesting statement.
There's no mechanics for it. Yeah. So you're more just trying to please. Yeah, I mean.
Well, I guess I don't understand what you're getting at. I don't understand what you're getting at.
Okay, so let's say your relationship with an NPC. This is what roots you in the story and kind of gives immersion. Are these relationships between the PCs and the NPCs, correct? But there are no game mechanics to express this.
Okay.
Which means that those relationships and how they turn out are largely due to arbitrary decisions by the game master.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well,
so the players aren't worried about mechanics. They're worried about pleasing the person running the game.
Well, what if there's like a reaction mechanic?
I mean, sure, if there is, but there's not. Unless you're going to.
Well, I don't know what game. Can you give me an example of a game that doesn't have that? I'll give you one.
Go ahead.
I'll give you one.
Go ahead.
Marvel superheroes. That's one of the reasons why I like Heroic. He actually has like an entire subsystem for doing that role play. Like, how are you going to talk to this person? Are you going to be dynamic and be charismatic? Are you going to be commanding? Are you going to be empathetic?
Truth.
So
yeah. No,
It's a
and
framework.
I think Genesis has a good social system to it. I like the mechanic from Tales from the Loop where you have this anchor, but it does those kind of things definitely put you in story game mode.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're done, even if there's a mechanic to it, you're in story game mode. I just think that it's hard. Like if I were going to do an OSC game, right? Like I do think it would be hard to do OSC relationship heavy, right? Like you would have to do it sort of mission. I don't know, man.
Well,
I think.
Well, again, just using Vic's game, Modern Necessities. I mean, the very design of it, with the character, he's using tropes from the movies.
Truth.
You are going to be playing games like that, and so it's actually kind of a smart design because he just sort of like cuts out all those considerations that we've been talking about. But and no offense to him, that might be fun for a couple one shots for me, but I'll get bored. You know what I mean? I would want something, unless, of course, like Nakatomi Tower. That's the second time I assault Nakatomi Tower. There's something else in it. You know what I mean?
No,
but generally speaking, I would want if I'm playing in a modern game, I'd want that. I want to have that player, the agency, to be able to say, okay, my character's this. I have these types of relationships, and then there's these factions that I can interact with. And I think I'm going to interact with this one particular one because of this relationship or because of this goal I have or whatever. And now we don't have to worry about mapping every single apartment building. We don't have to map all this stuff. We just go to the gun store where the fence is, or we go to the corporate high rise where the crime boss is and talk to them, and that's where the story, whether it's emergent or storyline or not, it's, to me, I'm arguing for player agency and emergent story too, because if you don't go to the crime boss, hypothetically, right, if you don't talk to him, that's never going to happen, or if it does, it's happening in the background and it's not going to affect, at least not directly, your character.
I think one of the things you might be discounting is the emergent play. Like if you're playing, like even in that Age of Rebellion game I was telling you about, where everybody had missions, right?
Yeah.
Those things do develop just like they would in like an OSR game, right? Where you're going to have, even if you don't have a big role playing scene, you're going to have your favorite NPC or what have you, or you're going to bump into this character and that's going to lead to this, which is going to lead to that.
Well, I guess it depends on how wide open your mission is. I mean, if your mission is survive K-Long, I would argue that that's not the type of mission that I think you're talking about. Survive K-Long is just sort of, I don't know, the overarching thing, the hook. And what happens is going to be dependent upon how the players move from one hex to the next, who they talk to, what kind of connections they make at like the capital city. I can't pronounce it off the top of my head right now. And so on and so forth. Yeah, there's like lizard people in the jungle you might meet, you know what I mean? So so that's still going to have that player agency, emergent story thing going on. But when I think of missions, I think of, okay, it's Nakatomi Tower. You gotta get Hans Gruber. How are you going to do it? And that's fine because that's like a dungeon crawl. To me, dungeon crawls are kind of like in the middle of like this sliding scale. On the one hand, you have complete, open world hex crawl, do whatever the heck you want, and on the other end, you have railroaded story, the mega dungeons in the middle. You have one place you're going, there's the railroad, but it's not much of a railroad because once you get there, it's whatever you want to do, right? So, and it would be fun for a little while, but like if I'm thinking modern games, especially if I'm going to play in a cyberpunk game, and I'm really looking forward to Nix's Call of Cthulhu game, I'm going to want to have a little bit more autonomy to have those develop relationships, not just start with a few, but develop relationships with NPCs that could then generate more game.
Then do you think
I'm actually arguing? I'm actually kind of sounding like the bro SR right now. Like I want to have that ability to do that. I can't believe I just.
So
Stranger things have happened.
First off, let's trade the word mission for heist.
I think that's even worse. Because a heist is one particular thing. Like a mission is broad, right? Do the heist, rescue the girl, kill Hans Gruber, find the bag of money, or pick up the bag of money from the informant.
There's a better word, and when I say the word and we think about the root of what it really means, especially when you're dealing with the nature of what makes these games so compelling, which is risk versus reward. It's not a heist, it's a gambit. A gambit is where there is something that is in play that creates this compulsion to act, and more importantly, risk yourself or have something that you care about at risk. The relationships piece kind of ties into it, right? Because with relationships in role playing games, they create some of the most worthless scenes that we ever have at the table unless there's a couple of key elements. One, you got to have a beatdown and a control. One is a very dominating force, and one is trying to control and work its way through the situation so that something can be progressed. The other element, besides like a power dynamic, is you've got to have the people that are in play. Someone has to get something out of it, even if they're equals. So there has to be a trade. And like, how is that negotiated? That should be connected to the situation at hand, to the theme of the setting, to the mission, if you want to do it, the goal. Again, run, Lola, run. She has 3 different situations in that she has to go through and navigate and hope that she doesn't fail. There's certainly the element of the heist is such I hate that. I hate heist as a role play term. Unfortunately, Mike Shea gravitates a lot towards. I even emailed that dude directly, and I said, "Look, I did," and I was like, dude, heist sounds so because you're already creating this presupposition, and it doesn't necessarily have to unfold that way. It's probably one of the reasons why I'm not attracted to games like Blades in the Dark. It's already so firmly in its lane, whereas a Gambit, man, that just opens up the playing field for how you can choose to relay information and have your players act upon it, and then continue to branch off with all these tendrils of choice in the spider web. The emergent.
I like that, actually. I like that word, and I think that works. So I'll use it. I think I would prefer gambits being generated organically as I move through the modern world with my modern character, relying on my relationships and my personal goals, versus I'm part of a thing and I get told, well, here's your gambit for the day.
So personal goals.
No one likes that because you're already being told a situation that you don't really have a chance to kind of respond to. If you Gary was mentioning earlier about like going to the bar. Well, if you have players and their characters and what they have in their immersion and what they want to go ahead and engage and push the buttons with is a bar scene. Well, we can create a gambit in a bar. I know I did a zombie scenario in the Ginger Man for Houston at the bar and did a whole like protect the Ginger Man bar against that well before Shaun of the Dead and World's End and all that stuff came out, all the Edgar Wright movies. I was in that stuff in like 2003. And that sort of situation, and that is modern because maybe this is also one of the other things that's important. It just kind of came to me when we're talking about planning, familiarity. If you can give some familiar roots, you're going to have a much better chance at having a game that lasts longer than 3 to 5 sessions.
I'd agree with that. I think Gary does not. I can tell. Gary, what's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind? So please understand that I'm really right now in a whole different mindset. I'm so far away from modern
You
gaming, it's not even funny.
you were
So
where I was 5 years ago.
yeah, so I know that my opinions are colored, right?
Is that a system problem or seeing it implemented over a period of time?
Um Characters have to have goals, right? Like they have to have something they're working towards.
Mm-hmm.
That it just has to be that way. I mean, or what are you doing? Are you fucking going shopping and fuck all that,
Well, that's where the
Um,
situations come in, right? We prep situations, not plots.
right, right. But if you're not gonna do missions, if you're not gonna have if you're not gonna have some kind of things that happen that force the characters to move one way or the other, then that character has to have a goal, and it needs to be something. In my opinion, it needs to be something that they tell the that the player tells the game master. Right. I don't want to start a game. Hey, we've made these modern day characters in this, crazy, small, crime ridden town. What do you want to do?
Well,
Because most players aren't going to do that, right? So you have to give them something to spur them forward, or
not
they need to
necessarily.
have a goal, or they need to have a goal.
I think a good modern game should have that sort of built in. I know Free League does it. Like I can't remember the exact term they use, but the players have like their dark secrets or something that kind of motivates them to do certain things. Again, they start off with relationships that a DM can use to tug and get them to or nudge in them into a particular direction. I know Wretched in a lot of their all their setting books they have like life paths that you can
Mhm.
roll up and that'll give you some stuff. So I don't think that's as big of a problem as you think it is. I mean, especially if you
I
sit
think it's the
down and
number
tell
one
your
problem I've
players
run
I
into.
well I and I look back at the row campaign, and the only thing I would do differently with my character is be a little more assertive with like what my character wants to do, because I don't think I really told you what my character wants to do.
Goals, and the
You
DM
know,
should know,
say
right?
what goals?
That's what
Yeah,
I was saying.
and
Yeah, goals,
yeah,
and that
and
the
I but
players should
like
talk
but
about with
all
the
you
game
need,
if you're going to have a
yeah,
completely open game.
but that's all you need to do is tell your players like, look, you need to have a goal and you need to work towards it. It can be secret, it can be open. I don't care, but let me know what it is so I can kind of
Yeah,
know what be prepared for it. But also, you need to move through this world. I mean, I think that's just good, even if you're playing fantasy. Even
right.
if the goal is, defeat your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of the women. Even if it's just that, that's good to have. So
Is my timeline railroady? If you guys have free agency to do whatever it is you want to do, but I'm going to start setting off fireworks every so many sessions, is that railroady?
I don't think so. Max Liao likes to call them timelines. Like if you ignore a villain's plot or whatever, right? You just ignore something. The world continues to turn with or without you, right? So of course there's going to be consequences. Hell, I love using consequences. I think consequences are a great motivator, and in some cases a punishment for players who are not paying attention. Um, you know, it's happened quite a bit in my Lamentations game. It's just like,
No,
you guys didn't do
I think you're
anything.
right.
So I don't think it's railroady at all. I think that's just more immersive, and especially when the players go, "What the heck? How did that happen?" I mean, if there really is sort of like this emotional thing that's happening at the table, and I don't mean like the players are crying; they're just kind of upset with you. They're like,
Yeah. Oh,
He just
you
froze. Look at that. Look at
"Why
that.
is the
froze.
building exploding?" And you go, "Hey, remember that time?" And so here we are. What do you
Yeah.
want to do now?
So let me ask you this. This is how I used to go about sort of a modern game or a more story-based game. And you tell me why this is right or wrong or what you do differently or what have you. I would come up with sort of a big story that I thought of as like a big TV season arc, right? you got 12 episodes of a series, and all of them are going to have little different things. But overall, this is the big thing happening. And then I would and then I would create the setting, I'd create the important people, not just people involved with the story, but like the mayor, the cop, the whoever you need in this town, right? The people you may run into. And then I would come up with the first episode, I guess you could call it, where it was act one. It was a little railroady. I just kind of wanted to get them into their world, and then I would do the thing, pull the plug that sent everybody off scrambling to do whatever it was they needed to do, right? You set the town on fire, you have the witch move in next door, whatever that thing is. And then it was kind of open. But I found when I did that, there was still that sort of, I don't know. What's wrong with that? What would you guys do different? How are you going to go about planning a campaign? Or if I understand one shots are easy, but if you're going to try to do something, a little bit longer in that style, how do you go about doing it?
If you already go in with, so we talked about goals, right? If you want to have, because it's players are going to do what the system rewards them to do, what they're incentivized to do. So you've got to still be connected to that, to whatever progression looks like, and have that tied in to your theme. So the progression, and they can be personal or they can be a group goal and such, but you're playing a game, and they want to see their characters grow. This is where I think the conflict usually happens in a lot of modern gaming, is because, and when I say the word, like we're all going to have our own little interpretations of it, but we kind of all have also the same shared understanding, which is, are modern games heroic? Do they need to be heroic? And at what point? Because we know super heroic modern, we know what that looks like, but heroism, and Matt, your Apocalypse Kajong, is that what it's called?
K Long.
K Long. Like, okay, so that's a really fascinating concept, right? Because boy, if there's anything that really, pushed what does real heroism look like in dark times, I think of that scene in the 1989 movie Casualties of War with Michael J. Fox, and those morality choices that he is confronted with and deals with. That game feels pretty lamentation. I mean, that movie feels very Lamentations to me. Casualties of War. It feels very Lamentations.
I'll have to put it on the watch list.
Oh, you've never seen it? Oh,
I've heard of it, but I'll put it on the watch list.
But it's in there. And so heroism, that call to action, and then the reward system that incentivizes player engagement, but to them also their character's advancement. Like, these are very different ladders. Like, one kind of goes this way and one kind of goes this way. So there's a lot of communication I think needs to take place, and you got to really connect. You got to really connect to something that is going to have more juice than just, again, 5 to 7 sessions. Like, what's going to get you? What's going to get you years in a way that's.
I think a good hook would help. Like, maybe you don't necessarily need like this like call to action right on session 1, but something that's kind of like in the background that is going to affect players' motivation. So like in K Long, all of reality is ending, right? Mm-hmm. In my I'm musing about this idea of having so like this one neighborhood in Avaladad, in this wretched new Flesh game, where the players are going to be from. There's going to be a motor
game, right? Modern game. Okay.
Yeah, cyberpunk. So there's going to be like a coffee shop that's sort of like the local hangout, and it's run by like good people, right? But there is going to be a street poet who has ties to this revolutionary underground. Okay. So there's I'm going to use that as sort of like probably the overarching theme, this revolution that's boiling under the surface, and they're going to get in trouble with like the local crime lord that is also there. There's a chop shops for cybernetic implants. Who knows where the guy gets his stuff, that kind of thing. So some kind of hook. There's definitely going to be a street gang, biker gang, that the players can be a part of if they want. I'm taking a lot of inspiration from Akira. What would be like that inciting, like, sort of hook would be just maybe even just simply as describing like the revolutionary tagging, like the spray paints and stuff, and like just the sense that there's something's happening that the players could be a part of if they want. I don't know. Maybe I need something a little bit more.
But I mean, for both you and then Gary also with Luna and what he, 1970s is I mean, you have a fiction that your players can relate to, because like the Appendix N for modern games is everything that we've consumed for the last 50 years. We have so much appendix, and by the way, all of our Appendix N's for a modern game, if we had unlimited resources to design our own perfect game, boy, I bet there are Appendix N's. Yeah, there would be some stuff that's shared, but there would also be some very different stuff on what we draw. Is Reservoir Dogs, is that a modern game being played out? Well, the heist maybe. Oh wait, we never see the heist. But we see action, we see choices, we see morality, we see definitely in the moment, I'm a cop, I'm bleeding out on the ramp. What do I do? Oh, I draw my gun and I plug that dude. I mean, these are instances, and they can hopefully inspire us to come up with situations that relate to character, that come off, so we don't go down the rabbit hole of trying to create this huge canvas of what we think it's going to be, and instead enjoy what it transforms from what the players bring to it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, ideally, you're right. I just think that realistically,
what's your pitch? Like, what do you put in front of your players to have them get ready for your game and the type of game that you're running? If you're going to give an Appendix N, like, to go back to that, because that's maybe an easy way.
That's what I did. I mean, that's what I think when I was recruiting for Luna. I think I actually said, Friday Night Lights meets Supernatural.
Right.
I think that was my pitch.
And then talking about modern games, think about how much of a morass they have to go through to be able to create something that differentiates them, unless they're tropey. They got to get really tropey in order to say, okay, this is our part of the pool. We're doing Weird West. We're doing, I don't know. It's a situation where it becomes very, it's very hard to convey and stay in something that doesn't feel like, again, a bunch of spies, a bunch of mercenaries, a bunch of people in a room.
What it sounds like,
not Cthulhu Tower, by the way, it's not a mega dungeon. Hot take.
Also,
it is if
his girl wasn't trying.
That's what I was saying. You design
it is if I design it, it will be a mega dungeon. I just want to say hey to Bear the Gen X GM. Thanks for stopping by, man. Appreciate you being here. And then I just want to highlight this too. Dying Breed kind of agrees with Gary on this. SWAT team, Black Ops, Gangster, Super Set games can all be driven by just setting a scenario. The railroad is built in and accepted, but just open modern without direction. I don't know. I get it. Like, I'm not saying you guys are off base or anything. I don't know if I'd be satisfied with, here's your next mission, here's your next gambit.
What if you were able to tie that in with, you're talking about the relationships, right? So let's think about TV, because honestly, if we're talking about modern games, you have to realize that fantasy games, everybody wants to sort of copy the big doorstop novel. You know what I mean? Like that's what when we think fantasy games, we're thinking of those Lord of the Rings and those other books, and Lord of the Rings, and some other books and Lord of the Rings. But when you're doing something modern, when you're doing something
Lord of the Rings, okay.
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
I totally
drink.
Ruined your train of sorry.
Yeah, my train of thought is going. shit. Well, no, what I was going to say is that your game emerges. I think it can emerge, and this is what I'm trying next time I do a modern style game. I think the emerging gameplay can come through in that. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you're playing, if you think of a TV show, and that's what I was getting at, is we're thinking of TV shows instead of novels, then what you have most of the time is a group of characters who are the best at what they do. But the real story is what's going on when they're not doing that, and how those people who aren't a part of that get caught up in that. For years, if you think about comics, I thought the Uncanny X-Men was all about when are Cyclops and Jean gonna get to, bang one out. But every time they get close, the fucking Sentinels come or Magneto, and they come and fuck everything up, right? But the real story is Jean and Scott. And that's kind of like with TV. So if you're talking about relationships and all that kind of stuff, I think that could emerge from the kind of game you think is railroading, if that makes sense. And it gives your game a direction.
I can't not disagree, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, I can't
We'll
disagree.
see what happens when we do Rocket City.
Yeah, I mean, like, because, like, honestly, when I do the second bit for the second of phase of what I'm calling the GSU, or no, wait, GCU, Gary Cinematic Universe, it's going to be a military campaign. Yeah, the GCU, and so that's going to be kind of like what you're describing. The superheroes are going to land on Omaha Beach.
Word.
Okay, and away you go, right? So that's going to be the railroad inciting event, but then they're going to have this mission, and how are you going to complete it? Assuming you survive, they probably will, because they're supers. Throwing tanks at German and that'll be awesome.
I can't wait, dude. I can't wait to be a player. I'm so excited.
But at the same time, though, that's a very different game, and that goes back to sort of like everyone's part of the same sort of group. And I'm not saying if you have like this sort of more open world thing where there's the very important NPCs that have some relationship to the players, can't have these gambits, because the NPC comes because the timeline has moved, right? So the NPC comes to the play. I got this problem. I made a bad deal with the chop shop. He gave me the cybernetic arm. I can't afford it. He wants it back. You know what I mean? Like well, now you have a mission.
Sorry, it's great.
That's funny.
Oh, we all got at least one out there we know about. Yeah, I just think, here's the thing. I think I've actually, when you were talking, for some reason I kept thinking, remember that night we did try to plan Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Nakatomi Tower? Maybe this is one of those situations where we should just online design a modern campaign and see how many different ways we can come at it and argue with each other once again.
Probably sometimes if we're sometimes drawn upon these shared fictions to kind of go like I think of a series like The Americans, where they have like missions throughout the whole series. I don't know if you guys have ever watched the series. If you haven't, it's incredible.
Parts.
But there's so much tension that is wrapped up as a result of their actions and a result of the choices and circumstances. So let's kind of deconstruct for a second. If you understand the general premise of it, they're Russian spies, they're husband and wife, but they were put together by the KGB, and they actually had kids, and they're in America because they're a long-term sleeper group that has now been called to action during the Cold War. And the series actually kind of goes like a year by year. I want to say it goes from like 83 to 88. But so you see the ongoing conflict of serving Mother Russia, dealing with all the challenges of seeing how their children, this is their relationships, by the way. They have that shared relationship, probably more important, by the way, in a modern game than in most other games. Shared relationships can be powerful bonding elements for our players at the table beyond the tropes of you're all part of an elite crack force, you're all part of the A team. That stuff just, I'm sorry, it runs out of steam. It runs out of steam with time. If you're all gangsters, The Sopranos would not work as a modern tabletop role-playing game because there's not enough action. It's just relationships.
Well,
Have
that
conflict.
leads me. That
So
actually leads me.
well, I'm just for a second. So again, if
Go
we're
ahead.
unpacking things, we're unpacking like what makes in the planning phase. 1, conflict. Russia versus America. Boom. 2, missions. Okay, we've got that. 3, relationships. So what have we identified? And it took us about 59 to 64 minutes to get here. So we've got some of these basic elements, which by the way, they're not very different from fantasy, right? So, but the character piece and really drawing that out, because eventually we're going to need something that makes each of these people different. Because if you're doing modern, not urban fantasy, they're all human. They're all human with human experiences, driving goals, motivations connected to the system. So rewards, goals, conflict, relationships, like we're kind of unpacking this in our own emergent way of dialogue. And I think
It
it's
sounds like
interesting.
some hippy dippy jam session, rap session, man. With
But-
all
but-
of the
I mean,
sorry, I'm just that's. I'm sorry. That's where it's at right now, and I have to say, I'll go back to the whole thing about we talk about relationships and da 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 da. That calls for the GM to be some kind of actor or what have you, and I don't think that should be necessary. If these relationships are gonna be so important to the game, then they need to have some kind of mechanical value. I don't know. If it doesn't work into the
it all deals with progression and advancement, right? Because at the end of the day, our players want to grow.
I think
The growth of their character is what relates because you're playing within a system. What does the system tell us? It's got to connect. Otherwise, you're going to have just this dissolution that happens and atrophies over sessions, and you wonder why the hell you never finished that campaign. You wonder why it had a lackluster ending or went off.
I'll
Because they don't get to be a dwarf or an elf or a half orc.
The RPG pundit. I'll bring up the RPG pundit. I mean, I don't think he'd have much to say about modern games, but he does have a supplement that I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it modifies the classic 2d6 reaction table, and he uses it for all these different situations, like if your character has to before a magistrate because of something that they did or whatever, to bribes, to all kinds of things. Like, these systems exist that can be used. So I don't think what your concern is, Gary, is all that big of a deal. It's certainly there, but I also want to make sure we're not creating mischaracterize what I mean by relationships. I mean, I keep seeing these hilarious comments from Mike and others about getting a call from the divorce attorney before you kick in a door. I mean, that might be funny once or twice, right? But I mean, I'm not talking necessarily about that. I mean, it's more like you're good buddies with the merchant, the chop shop owner in the cyberpunk setting, right? And then he becomes. He needs something from you, that kind of thing. So, and Gary is, I'm fuzzing out. Anyway, Gary, I just saw you pop a comment in our private chat about the Star Wars obligation. That's actually a great example.
Oh yeah, that's a great system.
Talk about it.
That's a great system for modern obligations, like bringing that sort of.
I know everybody likes to make fun of the Star Wars narrative dice. I'm like the only dude that loves that game, and I do love that game. Y'all are all wrong.
I played it once. I liked it. I liked that.
But every character in the sort of the bounty hunter smuggler part of it, every character has an obligation, and it's basically a debt. Everybody, if you're one of those people, everybody owes something to somebody, and that obligation can come up in gameplay. And even if it doesn't come up as part of the story, they do this neat thing where if your obligation comes up and the GM doesn't want to like bring the bounty hunters out to get you, he's got other things planned, then you suffer stress. It's like a mechanic where you're actually just like thinking your character's like, fuck,
Oh
I have this
God,
bounty.
now we're really getting modern realism. Oh man, that's my life.
Yeah. So there are systems that do it. It's just, look, I'm just going to go, and I think we're probably going to talk about this again at some point. I think it is.
I think we barely scratched the surface of thinking.
Yeah,
about
it's so much
how
more difficult,
it, but also how people will enjoy it.
If you're going to get away from the mission-based modern game, I think you have more work than you know, and I do think that you got to be fast on your feet in a different way that you have to be fast if you're playing like Dungeons and Dragons and just kind of, going with it.
Well, you have so much that you can pull from for reference for traditional fantasy as comfort food to get you by. But the reality is I actually don't, having run a lot of modern games, maybe not fantastical ones. Although I did in my Marvel superheroes face rip game, I had the X-Men, they were on a mission and I had the Blackbird crash in a jungle and then I hunted them down with a Predator. And I had the Predator hunting down and killing X-Men. I actually killed Gambit. It's funny that we talk about Gambit. I killed Gambit with the Predator. But anyway, but I think we've scratched the surface a lot of how we approach it, how our players consume it is another level. The reward system, progression. None of us can agree on a system. None of us can agree on how we would start and where we would end up, and that's okay. That's fine because we're going to know our players.
I think me and Matt would agree, and I think you might agree. At this point, I know that both me and Matt are in this phase where universal table, like Marvel superheroes, are heroic. Like we're both convinced that can do everything as long as you limit it.
Oh no, I can't.
Yeah,
I can't do it. That's the one thing that
you don't agree.
No,
you don't think like if you kept everybody at excellent, like excellent was your cap, you could do modern games.
No, I tried that once actually using G.I. Joe and Cobra. I did it for about a year and a half, and it was all so samey. And I'm like, because what makes the G.I. Joe character so cool? It's their character, but they're all pretty much good strength, excellent strength. Very few of them, maybe Snake Eyes is amazing. I'll give Snake Eyes an amazing, maybe incredible for Storm Shadow. But I did it for like a year and a half, and I just want to wash my hands of it because the luster wore off because it was all so samey. It's the same problem again with if you're trying to run gangster, crack commando squads because everyone's a human. Like these things.
I bet you could do a really fucking great gangster game and do it like Pendragon style, where you have like one big thing that happens a year, and then you have your domain play where you have territories and all that kind of shit, and like your daughter wants to marry the scumbag drug dealer family, or you could do all kinds of cool shit with a gangster game.
Well, that's why professions would be such an intrinsic part because look, we spend a third of our life at our jobs, right? And so professions in a modern setting, what we do.
I said you do.
Yeah, but I'm saying professions are different than classes. Professions in a modern setting, well, first off, they actually are kind of a hidden advantage because you really can tie a lot more into that because we know it. We know a lot more about how professions affect the modern day way of living. And you can create a lot more emergent situations. I mean, come on, we can come up with random tables all day long. Just pull up Drudge Report. I mean, Jesus, you can come up with all sorts of things that you want to throw at your characters that you don't have to have pre-planned, but can be based on their character. You can give them friction. You have to have conflict. If you don't have it, you don't have a game.
Yeah, I don't know. You're probably right.
Can you tell my wife that?
I think both styles that we've been because we have basically they're talking about two separate styles.
Right.
Both styles work, and I think they're exemplified by Modern Necessities, Vic's game, and Wretched RPG, the Red Rooms game. They're both kind of two sides of this coin. Call of Cthulhu's come up. I think that is a great example of like a modern game that works well. I have my issues with the sanity system, but it overall
everybody's
it works.
investigators. Like people buy in. You already are bought into the premise, so you're going to go investigate.
Well, and that's the thing with genre-specific games. It's going to be that way, right? I mean, for the most part, you might have some characters that are outliers, but I think even in Westerns, you're going to have sort of those tropes, and you're going to, it's defend the town from the bandits, or whatever it's going to be. I do agree, though, Matt. Like, I've been thinking, you keep talking about agency, and I do wonder sometimes, could you do a sort of open world, what do you want to do modern day game?
Well, that's
like, do you have to have a special setting? Like in a Wasteland, I could do like an open world style game. In a sci-fi thing, I can figure out, but a modern day, what do you want to do?
I hear what you're saying, and it is a challenge, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've chosen to do this with Wretched New Flesh. I got two of the books. One's like a purely setting book, the other's like the game book. And Miguel has a ton of random tables in there. I would probably photocopy them and put them in like a quick folder, so for a quick reference. But I think the area that they're starting out, where I want them to start out with, will have enough variety of like faction-esque type things for them to like sink their teeth into based on the character that they make. And then from there, if they decide, hey, we're going to just play a motorcycle gang and we're going to go rob some rich guy on the other side of town, I'm like, okay, roll up some stuff and here you go,
Right. But see, there's the thing, your characters, are you going to tell all your characters, hey, y'all should all be a motorcycle gang? Are you gonna, are all five play? I mean, that's because then, I wonder if you're not going to have that pull where people are kind of being like, he wants to do that, they want to do this, but I don't know. I really don't know, because
that's a good point. That
with the story,
No, that is a good point. And I think, well, I'm going to kind of go heavy with like the description of the area. I think I'm calling the neighborhood the Sink. Because it's just so run down and poverty stricken. I really want to instill like a sense of hopelessness, and this is where you're from, this is where you grew up. Sorry. But what do you want to do, like, and then everyone's gonna kind of know everybody. So they're going to know who the crime boss is, or at least who's connected to the crime boss. They're going to know the chop shop. They're going to know the street poet and her mom who runs the coffee shop. They're going to know the bike shop owner, and they're going to know that there's a biker gang. These kids that mean well, but they do cause trouble. They're not like hardened criminals, And there's a couple other NPCs I want to make, and then I'm just like, so this is your neighborhood. You've grown up here. What do you want to make? And I might actually do something I rarely do and run a session 0, so everyone can just kind of talk and figure out what they want to do.
I think you have to do session 0 for those kind of games. I really do. And I'm not a big, well, kind of, I'm transitioning right now as far as my gameplay style.
No, I'm glad that you spoke to the fact that we have to do a session 0, and the reason why you have to do it with modern gaming, again, it's the appendix N of our shared culture. We all have different translations and interpretations.
Unless you were all badasses on a team that's got to go do the things.
Sure. Well, at the end of the day, because what you're talking about, with every player character that's at the table, you're bringing with it its own set of circumstances that player interpretation of their character is going to be put upon your game, and the other players have to respond to it. at the end of the day, there's a seesaw. It's a very important seesaw. And if we can diagnose this, all the other stuff we talked about tonight, like it all just kind of falls into the jar. They're the little rocks, but the big rock, the two biggest rocks, and if we just get this right, the rest of it can work. Is your group of player characters, are they bonded by circumstance or purpose? If you can identify that, you can do all the other stuff we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah.
It'll all fill in. Like, we're going to figure it out. It'll be all right.
Here's the other problem, though, right? Players want to be in charge of everything, and they want their backstories, and they want to have this kind of character and everything else.
Sure, it's fine.
But if you're doing a modern game,
purpose or create a circumstance,
fuck all that, dude. Characters shouldn't be able to. You shouldn't be able to say who your parents are, and you shouldn't be able to define like everything that happened. Of course you do. Of course you do.
And in Luna, you did that, and it's one of the things that as a player, and I wasn't. I mean, that's one of the only times I've had a chance to have multiple sessions with you. But no, absolutely. Now there should be some parameters, right? Because if everybody's an orphan, I'm sorry, that's just lame, right? Yeah. But players should be able to bring their own level of circumstance. Our job is to give them bookends, right? I don't need 4 pages. Put whatever you want into 2 or 3 paragraphs. Bullshit. I will work with that. But no, you can't deny your players to create, because how are they relate to it?
They don't even know what the world is. They don't even know what the world is.
If you want them only to connect to what you are weaving, they're not going to bring their own thread. And they're just going to deal with the thread that you've got, and your quilt will be weak because you will be the only dude that will be weaving it.
And to go off of that, because Disco Barbarian is making an interesting point here, I actually did this with my Forbidden Lands game. When we started, we sat down. I had a little thing sort of set up for the town and what they might do in case I was looking at a bunch of blank stares. But as they started making characters, they started talking, and one guy, my best friend, was like, "Oh, I'm going to make a dwarf peddler. Is it all right if I'm, the son of the blacksmith here?" And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he's like, yeah, in fact, I'll be, trying to push my dad's wares as we like travel on to the next place. And I'm like, awesome. All of a sudden, he created a story hook, a plot hook to leave the town. I didn't have to, the thing I had come up with, I tore it up and tossed it because now my buddy did this thing. And then the rest of the group just started talking about how they knew each other and how they came to be in the town. And it was way more interesting than if I had said, you do this, and this, that, and the other thing. So there's something to that. And I want to be clear here. I'm not one to just hand over the reins of like my world. Right. But that was really, really helpful.
Well, just so you know, I didn't make anybody do a thing, but I did say, you could do this, you could do that, you could be attached here. Yeah, I don't know. What's funny is a couple years ago, I would have been probably arguing your side, and you'd have probably been arguing mine.
Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So no, and I think there's a lot of really good points, and everything can work. I think one big thing that, and I know it's late, we're over time. I would say this
passionate topic. It's good. It's fun.
Yeah, I do think one of the things we just barely touched on that really makes a big difference is the group of people playing together.
Sure.
I think you got to have people who want that really immersive sort of, story game, for, lack of a better term. And if you don't have the players that want it, it's going to be a little
that's like a band thing, right, though, Gary? I mean, like, that from being in bands. Like, if you've got people, they got different messages or different themes or inspirations that they want to bring to it. I mean, it's not unlike probably like being in a band. If they're not communicating,
if they're not communicating,
anybody can say, yeah, absolutely.
No, that's great. Anything? I know we've gone past midnight, and I think next time we.
I just want to highlight Disco's comment here. I've wanted to make a one-shot cop game where the GM is the pissed off captain. He's got all the players in the office yelling at them about the mission, and that's the adventure. I love it.
Because you're too old for this shit.
God damn it, Foley! Makes my dick itch.
Ron Cox
Yeah.
or Arlie Ermey.
Hey, I'll also say I don't think I have a firm stand on this. I think a lot of my arguments come from probably like the past, experience over the past year, because I have had throughout gaming, whatever kind of games I'm playing, I've always had a really fun time with story and NPCs and all that kind of stuff. And I think just over the past year, there's just been a couple times when I've been like, fuck, man, like, you know what I mean? Like, that was all me, and it is a different way to run games. It's a different way to think about games. Depending on who you ask, I guess, some people would disagree.
Well, we'll be talking about this topic again, I'm sure. Maybe get into the nitty gritty of something more specific, but we are out of time. I guess our watch has ended. Any last word or final thoughts? Not last words. That's morbid. Final thoughts.
Gary, did this help tonight? Talking it out a little bit though? Did it get your brain stewing a little bit?
I'm so far away from story game mode that so after the row is over, which is heroic, Matt's gonna run the next thing, and then we're gonna fast forward to the 60s. And even though that's a game that's kind of built for story and all that kind of good stuff, like I'm not like my head is so in OSR mode right now that I am having to kind of crack out of that to start writing things down for Rocket City. That's what it's going to be called, is Rocket City. Because it is two different ways of thinking. So did it help me? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out.
Yeah, I think on that note, on the flip side, I've been running Lamentations of Elemental Evil for almost 3 years now, which is I purposely was like, I'm not going to do anything. I literally don't prep for the sessions. I'm like, what do you guys want to do? And then I start rolling dice. So I'm kind of craving a little more story game. But I want to be good about player agency. Like, I'm not going to sit there and write a novel. I tried doing that back in the day with like when I was running 5e games, trying to have like this amazing So, and I'm done with that. So like this like modern thing, this idea, and even the supers game, it's going to be kind of like a challenge. Like, how can we thread that needle where it's like there's a thing happening and you're part of that thing, but here you go, guys, figure it out. So this was a good discussion. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I think, kind of a next phase of it, it's the kind of thing I'm going to kind of leave us tonight and go and kind of reflect on, is a lot of the OSR principles and how we can still hold true to some of those things that make, the very beginning games of tabletop role-playing games so memorable. And, rulings, not rules. The answers are not on your character sheet. By the way, that's a really interesting statement in a modern game context of how does that even get interpreted. So like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go back to my Matt Finchian primer a little bit. I want to play around a little bit with, because I did the whole Fallout Everyday Heroes thing. By the way, I finally got around to watching Fallout. My wife didn't know a single thing about this show except that there was a nuclear element. She loves it. It went all these different places, and it's rooted in some like realism, history, the 50s, and it has the fantastical. But you think about what made that show so good for 8 episodes of Amazon for her as a filthy casual, but me as someone who's playing all the games and is playing through New Vegas again right now, I booted it all up, is watching the characters evolve of like Lucy or the Ghoul or Maximus, and seeing those arcs. In modern games, if we get too entrenched in a genre or concept of character or the group, you will not get that. I'm sorry, the A-team has no arc. And so if we're doing role-playing games for immersion, You can get the short beats of machine gun fire and cheesy, Hans Zimmer action music. But if you want immersive role playing, we got to have conflict. We got to have situations, and we got to have great characters brought to the table from our players. That's all I got. So
that was a final thought, not an opening for an argument, Gary. You look like you're about to burst.
he's good.
All right. Guys, thanks so much for being here tonight. We'll probably talk more about modern
Chat
games.
is awesome.
Maybe, yeah, chat was great tonight.
Chat's
We'll probably hit like, subscribe, bell icon, If you're on Rumble, please hit follow. And we'll probably be talking more about this again. Maybe
We
get
had
a little bit
0
more
likes,
specific.
man. We got to do better next time to tell people.
Yeah. All right, guys. Our watch is ended.
Have a good night, everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Dude, get up. I think I heard